Poor dinner owner feeds a broke freezing biker. Weeks later, his life never same. Snow swirled across the lonely road, hiding the world in white silence. In the distance, a flickering neon sign glowed like a heartbeat refusing to stop. A poor diner owner, tired yet stubborn, stood behind his counter. He didn't know it yet. Tonight, a stranger would change his life forever. Charlie's diner had seen better days. Once, laughter and clinking plates filled the air, a refuge for truckers and families passing through. But times changed. Chains opened nearby, mills closed, and families moved away. Now the booth sat empty, and Charlie's smile, once easy, was carried on tired shoulders. Charlie was a man built from work. His broad hands bore scars of kitchen knives and splintered wood. His hair had gone gray too soon, his eyes carrying both kindness and weariness. Still, he stayed open every night, waiting for customers who rarely came. Behind the counter, bills stacked up, hidden in a drawer. The roof leaked. The heaters rattled. He patched what he could, stretching dollars until they snapped. But surrender? That word wasn't in Charlie's vocabulary, so he wiped down counters already clean, poured coffee no one ordered, and kept the jukebox humming in the corner. To Charlie, every night was a battle against silence, and though business had all but vanished, he stood his ground, because closing early felt like giving up on himself. The storm outside deepened, snow piling high along the roadside. Wind howled against the diner's windows, rattling them like brittle bones. Charlie glanced at the clock, closing time. But he never closed on time anymore. He thought about the past. About Mary, his late wife, who had once decorated the diner with flowers each spring. She'd made every stranger feel like family, her laughter ringing louder than the jukebox. It had been 5 years since cancer took her, and though Charlie never spoke of it, he felt the absence in every corner. He also thought of his daughter, Claire, who lived 2 states away, raising kids of her own. She called often, urging him to sell the diner, to let go. But how could he? This diner wasn't just a building. It was memory. It was love carved into every booth, every recipe. Charlie sighed, poured himself a cup of coffee, and leaned on the counter. The storm pressed against the windows, the silence inside louder than thunder. He was ready to lock up when the door creaked and the bell above rang, slicing the silence like a blade. A figure stumbled inside. The cold entered first, biting sharp. Then the man followed, a biker. His leather jacket was thin, soaked from snow, boots caked in slush. His face pale, lips blue, hands trembling. He looked like he hadn't eaten in days. He slid onto a stool, his head low, eyes avoiding Charlie's. "Coffee," he muttered, voice barely above a whisper. Reaching into his pocket, he spilled coins onto the counter. Nickels, dimes, a couple of pennies. Shaking fingers tried to count, but the money was barely enough. Charlie studied him. Every instinct told him this man was broken. By the road, by life, maybe both. His knuckles were cracked, his breath shallow. For a moment, Charlie thought of himself years ago, struggling when the diner was just beginning, Mary by his side. Without a word, Charlie poured the coffee, but he didn't stop there. He ladled a steaming bowl of beef stew, placed bread on the side, and added a slice of pie. Mary's old recipe. "On the house," Charlie grumbled, pretending to busy himself with dishes. The biker's eyes flickered, wet with disbelief. Then he ate. Slowly at first, then like a starving man tasting life again. The diner was silent except for the clink of spoon against bowl. The jukebox played faintly, a broken tune trembling in the corner. Charlie pretended not to watch, but he did. The way the biker's shoulders loosened, how color slowly returned to his cheeks. It reminded Charlie of Mary's words, "Feed a stranger, and you might feed their soul." She used to say that often. When the biker finished, he sat quietly staring at his empty plate. Then he stood, leaving a crumpled note beneath his cup. He didn't wait for thanks or offer his name. He simply nodded once, pulled his jacket tighter, and walked back into the storm. Charlie picked up the note. It wasn't much, just messy handwriting that read, "Thank you. More than you know. No name, no promise. Just gratitude." He tucked it into his apron pocket. He told himself it didn't matter, but for some reason he held on to that piece of paper all night. He didn't know why, but something about the stranger's quiet, desperate eyes stayed with him, and Charlie couldn't shake the feeling that this wasn't the last time their paths would cross. The days that followed were harder. The snow melted into slush, leaking through the diner's broken roof. Charlie mopped with one hand while answering debt collectors with the other. Next month, he repeated, though he wasn't sure how he'd make it. Customers trickled in, fewer and fewer each day. Truckers stopped choosing Charlie's diner, heading for slick new rest stops instead. And every evening Charlie closed with just enough to cover groceries, never enough to chip away at debt. One night, Claire called. "Dad, you can't keep this up. Sell the diner. Move closer to us. Be with your grandkids." Charlie swallowed hard, staring at the empty booths. "I can't," he said softly. "This place is your mother's heartbeat. Selling it would feel like burying her all over again." Claire didn't argue. She knew her father's stubbornness. She only said, "Take care of yourself, Dad, promise me." When he hung up, Charlie sat alone in the quiet diner. The jukebox hummed a weary tune. He rubbed the folded note in his apron pocket, still carrying it like a secret reminder. He didn't know why, but holding it made him feel less alone. Weeks passed. Winter clung stubbornly to the town. Charlie's diner stayed open, though fewer people walked through the door. Each night he wiped the counters, poured himself coffee, and stared at the clock. Hope grew thinner than the stew he stretched to save costs. One evening, as the snow fell again, the bell above the door rang. Charlie looked up. It wasn't a customer this time, but 3 men in sharp suits. Strangers, their shoes too polished for this worn-out diner. "Mr. Daniels?" the tallest asked. Charlie nodded warily. The man smiled. "We've been sent to speak with you. A client of ours has taken an interest in your diner." Charlie frowned. "Client?" The men exchanged glances but offered no name. "He wishes to remain anonymous for now, but he asked us to assure you he's serious." They handed Charlie an envelope, thick and sealed. "Inside, you'll find his proposal. He's offering investment, repairs, and full support to keep this place alive. He believes this diner still matters." Charlie's hands trembled. He hadn't told anyone about his debts, about the leaks in the roof. Yet somehow someone knew and cared, but who? That night, Charlie sat in his kitchen with the envelope before him. He hesitated before opening it, his heart pounding like it hadn't in years. Inside was a typed letter. "Mr. Daniels, this diner saved me once. You offered me warmth when I had nothing. You treated me like a man when I felt less than human. Now I want to return that kindness. Let me help you keep this place alive. I'll cover repairs, debt, and more. No conditions. Just gratitude. A friend." Charlie's throat tightened. He knew immediately. The biker. The man who had left with only a crumpled note, but how? Who was he? The next morning, contractors arrived. Within days, the leaky roof was fixed. New paint coated the walls and the jukebox was repaired to its original shine. Word spread. Old customers returned, curious about the revival. Truckers pulled in again, filling the booths. The laughter came back. Charlie stood behind the counter, overwhelmed, watching his diner breathe again. And though he didn't know his mysterious benefactor's full story, he knew one thing. Kindness once given had found its way back. Business grew steadily. Families filled booths once silent. Children pressed faces against the pie display, just like they used to when Mary was alive. Charlie's smile returned, a little less weighed down by worry. Still, he kept wondering. Who was the biker? Why had he chosen Charlie's diner? One evening after closing, Charlie found a letter slipped under the door. No return address, just his name scrawled across the envelope. Inside, another note. "Charlie, I'll come by when the time is right. Until then, know this. Your kindness saved me more than food ever could. You reminded me I was still human." Charlie held the paper close. His heart ached with questions, but he also felt something he hadn't in years. Hope. Mary had always believed kindness echoed even across years. And here it was, echoing back, stronger than Charlie ever expected. He closed the diner that night with a full register. But more than that, with a heart not quite so lonely. Still, in the quiet of his apartment, he whispered into the air, "Come back, son. Whoever you are, let me thank you." The stranger didn't return immediately. Weeks passed, and though the diner thrived, Charlie couldn't stop looking at the door each time the bell rang. One rainy afternoon, a group of bikers pulled in. Their jackets bore patches, their laughter rowdy. Charlie felt a flicker of recognition scanning their faces, but none matched the one he remembered. He served them anyway, hot coffee and pie. As they left, one paused. "Boss told us about this place. Said it saved him once." Charlie froze. "Your boss?" The biker smiled. Yeah, runs a company now. Big one. Built it from scratch. But he said when he was at rock bottom, a small diner fed him. Said he owed his second chance to the man behind the counter. Charlie's breath caught. So the stranger wasn't just a drifter. He had built something big. The biker clapped Charlie's shoulder. He'll come around. He said he wants to shake your hand himself. Charlie stood in the doorway long after they left, the rain soaking his apron. His heart pounded. The story wasn't over. The stranger was coming back. It was a Thursday evening when it finally happened. The diner was half full, laughter bouncing off the walls. The bell above the door rang and Charlie glanced up out of habit. There he was, the biker, but different now. His jacket was new, his shoulders straighter, his eyes clearer. He carried himself like a man who had rebuilt his life. For a moment, neither spoke. Then the biker smiled softly. Evening, Charlie. Charlie's hand shook as he set down the coffee pot. It was you, the man nodded. I told you I'd come back. The room seemed to fade around them. Charlie studied his face, the same man who once trembled in the cold, now standing tall. His throat tightened. Why me? The biker's gaze softened. Because you saw me when no one else did. You didn't look at me like trash. You fed me like I mattered. That night gave me the strength to keep going. Charlie swallowed hard. Words caught in his chest. For once, silence carried more weight than anything he could say. They sat together in a booth, coffee steaming between them. The biker finally introduced himself. Name's Jack, used to ride aimlessly, chasing nothing. Lost my family, my job, my way. That night in your diner, I was ready to give up. Charlie listened, his heart aching. Jack's voice cracked as he continued. But when you set down that stew and pie, I felt human again. It reminded me of my mom. Reminded me of being cared for. That night, I chose to try one more time. Jack went on to tell his story, how he'd started working odd jobs, saving every dime, eventually founding a repair business. One customer led to another. Years later, he owned a company with dozens of employees. But through it all, he never forgot the man who gave him warmth when the world was cold. Charlie's eyes blurred. He looked at Jack, no longer a stranger, but living proof of Mary's words. Feed a stranger and you might feed their soul. Jack reached across the table, gripping Charlie's hand. You saved mine. From that day forward, Jack became more than a benefactor. He became family. He visited often, sometimes with his employees, sometimes alone. The diner, once nearly forgotten, turned into a landmark of second chances. Locals whispered about the story, the poor owner who fed a biker, and the biker who later saved the diner. It spread beyond town. Travelers came not just for food, but for the story, for the reminder that kindness mattered. Charlie never boasted. He worked the counter, poured coffee, served pie, just like always. But he carried himself lighter, his burden eased. One evening, Claire visited with her kids. When she saw the bustling diner, she hugged her father tight. You were right not to give up, she whispered. Charlie smiled, glancing at Jack, who laughed with customers at a nearby booth. I wasn't alone, he said softly. For the first time in years, Charlie felt peace. Mary's diner, their dream, lived on. Not through profit, but through the echo of kindness passed forward like an unbroken chain. Years later, people still told the story. Truckers passed it on like folklore. Young waitresses shared it with wide-eyed customers. This is the place, they'd say, where a simple meal saved a life. Charlie grew older, slower, but his diner never closed. Jack kept supporting, ensuring it stood strong. Together, they built something far beyond business. One winter night, as snow fell once more, Charlie locked up the diner and stood outside. The neon sign flickered against the white storm just as it had years ago. He thought of Mary, of her laughter, of the night Jack first walked in. Jack joined him on the sidewalk, hands in his pockets. They stood in silence, watching the snow drift. Funny, Jack murmured. All this started with a bowl of stew. Charlie chuckled softly. Sometimes that's all it takes. In the quiet snow, two men who once had nothing stood side by side. Proof that small kindness can echo louder than thunder, carrying across years, saving not just one life, but two. Charlie passed away peacefully years later, surrounded by family, with Jack holding his hand like a son. At the funeral, the diner was packed. Customers, friends, travelers, all who had heard the story. They spoke of his kindness, his stubbornness, his quiet strength. Jack kept the diner alive in Charlie's honor. He hung a framed note behind the counter, the crumpled one Charlie had kept all those years. Thank you. More than you know. People came from far and wide to see it. They'd order stew and pie, sit in the same booths, and remember the man who had fed a stranger without expecting anything in return. For Jack, it wasn't about business anymore. It was about carrying forward the lesson Charlie had given him. That sometimes the smallest gesture, the warmth of food, the dignity of being seen, could rewrite a person's story. Charlie's spirit lived in every plate served, every laugh shared, every hand Jack shook. The diner was no longer just a building. It was a heartbeat. Mary's, Charlie's, and now Jack's too. On a quiet evening, Jack stood behind the counter, apron tied loosely around his waist. He poured coffee for a weary traveler, slid a slice of pie across the counter, and smiled softly. The traveler looked surprised. How much? Jack shook his head. On the house. The man's eyes filled with disbelief, the same look Jack once wore. And in that moment, Jack understood. He wasn't just keeping the diner alive. He was keeping the cycle of kindness alive, passing forward what Charlie had once given him. As the jukebox played softly in the corner, Jack glanced at the neon sign flickering outside. Snow fell gently against the windows. He thought of Charlie, of that first night, of the stew and pie that had saved his life. He whispered under his breath, almost like a prayer, "Your kindness lives on. Old friend." The diner, once nearly lost, now pulsed with new life. And in every meal served, every stranger welcomed, the truth remained clear. Kindness never ends. It only multiplies, echoing across lives, across time. Charlie's story reminds us, kindness, no matter how small, can change a life forever. A bowl of stew, a slice of pie, a moment of dignity, it all matters. If this story touched your heart, please subscribe, like, and press the bell icon. More stories of hope await you.